we've got TfL now operating under an emergency budget, and you've had to pause or cancel everything you can to balance the budget, including a lot of the Healthy Streets projects. But there has been 45 million to allocate to the boroughs, which I understand is fully allocated. So my question is, how has TfL prioritised the Streetspace projects, and are the boroughs with better existing provision for walking and cycling, for example, being given greater support because they're in a better position to deliver? So that's a question for Will to start with, but I'd also be very interested to hear what Julian has to say on it.
So you're right. Due to the fact that the tube was running throughout this whole process, and our whole network was running for key workers during lockdown, the fact that we had a 90-odd% fall in revenue on this, there was the need for the government support. As part of that, for this first tranche, for this first up until the end of September, the existing Healthy Streets schemes, most of them were put on pause, and that's why the Streetspace programme has come in. You're right in saying that the total amount of funding as part of the TfL package was £55 million. Now that was 10 million for TfL and 45 million for boroughs. There was an additional 25 million that was allocated to London through the Department for Transport, of which 5 million has been allocated, and another 20 million is in the process of being looked at the moment. The 45 million pounds is not enough. I don't think I think that we had over 100, I think just under 100 million pounds worth of proposals for schemes as part of from boroughs. Wonderful to see that level of ambition and priority coming from colleagues across London. But of the 45 million, there was 30, we wanted to cover the sunk costs from schemes that had already been either committed to, contracts that had already been fulfilled, and crucially, staff costs in boroughs. Because the last thing we need is during this period to hollow out London's capacity and the skills of all those borough officers. So of that 45 million, about 14 million of that was for those sunk costs and staff contributions to keep that going. 30 million went to the Streetspace plans. There is obviously the extra 25 million from DFT, and that's now being done jointly with TfL. So we have a regular meeting, a weekly meeting of what is now called the Active Travel Oversight Group, I think it is. I always forget these acronyms. They seem to TfL thrive off acronyms, and I kind of need a glossary as part of my daily life. But it's that, which includes TfL, myself, number 10, as well as the Department for Transport. And what we're doing with the additional the Department for Transport money is coordinating that through that group. So the last thing I want is more boroughs to have to create more. We don't want to create more work for boroughs where they've already submitted some very good schemes. We just haven't got the budget to fund it all. So that process will be done, so coordinating through the existing framework and hopefully allocating funds to some of those projects that didn't get funding in the first phase. In terms of how we are prioritizing it, as I said, there's been a massive there's much more need for this than there is supply of finance. And so what we have done, but that said, I do want to say just the scale of what is being delivered, with the amount that's being delivered. I think we're funding over 600 different schemes in the boroughs. As I said, the number of livable neighbourhoods, the number of 400 school streets, the 66 plus cycle routes. I think in the next 4 months, we're probably going to deliver more cycle routes than the previous mayoral administration in both terms in 4 months. So just the scale of what's happening is truly astonishing. So I think we're getting bang for buck. But we are having to prioritise where that investment goes. And so one of the number of things we've been looking at is doing, as you know, I've based a lot of what we're doing on strategic cycle analysis and a walking analysis, which has shown where there are priority needs. We did a very we rapidly redid those for sort of emergency measures, identifying hotspots. Alison picked up on some of the radial routes. How do we get to town centres? But also understanding where the busiest, most crowded pavements are. But, I don't want to say that TfL computers, no offence to Alex, TfL computers can't decide all of this. The boroughs have so much great knowledge from either their brilliant officers or communities themselves. Yeah. So that's why working really closely with them has led to a lot of these schemes coming in. There have been the way that we've asked, we selected the bids that came in, and we'll continue to use this approach, is can these things be delivered? Are they good quality? And we have to meet the quality designs. We can't waste money on stuff that isn't good enough. Is it good value for money? This is public. Even though there's less money of it, it's still public money, and we need to get good value. And I'm totally convinced we're getting good value on it, just because of the enormity of what we're actually being able to deliver with a very small amount of money. But we've also got to factor in, can this be delivered within the agreed timescales? Because these are emergency temporary measures that will be being delivered up until the autumn. So is it actually feasible? And do we all agree that these are feasible to be delivered that way? And then there are clearly, while the whole world has changed due to COVID, the physics of the world hasn't changed. There's still limited amount of space. There's still a lot of the same problems that we've had in delivering anything at any point over the last 4 years. Those things still exist. We still need to balance bus passengers, as I said, and other modes and freight and everything else. So, there's also got to be looking at, well, what impact does this have on the broader network? So the prioritization is being done through those lenses. Sorry, I've just gone off on one, and I hope I've covered a lot of what you asked. And then the final piece on this is that a cycle route from nowhere to nowhere doesn't really lead to some of the changes that we want to see. Part of this is also looking at what's the existing cycle network and how can we fill in some of the blanks, join up existing routes, improve some of the routes. So if you go down to, the Cycle Superhighway 8, for example, that was delivered, it was one of the very first cycle routes delivered way before my time. It's essentially a bit of blue paint on a road. That now has been improved to actually enable people who may be less confident in cycling to start cycling, because it's now got physical separation. Similarly, there are upgrades to Cycleway 5 through Lambeth, where maybe it wasn't meeting quality criteria in the right places. Similarly, Cycle Superhighway 7 from Collier's Wood up to Balham is an upgrade of existing routes. So we've got to take in the lens of how do we improve this, how do we improve that network, and how do we get the greatest bang for the buck in terms of the greatest potential for people to use this infrastructure.
Thank you. That was massively comprehensive and really very, very useful. The one question that comes from what you've just said is, what about those boroughs that aren't coming forward with the programmes that deliver the good value for money, that are able to be delivered and that deliver that quality of standard that provides a proper network? Is there anything being done to help those boroughs to produce better bids? I mean, has every borough had some money, or are there boroughs that are really struggling to get bids together that will deliver in the way that you need them to deliver at the moment?
So we have this is obviously some boroughs, the range of reasons why some boroughs are very good at delivering, and others partly political will, partly the capacity of officers, partly the sort of history of the area, partly the nature of the area and the nature of the populations and the nature of the demographics and the nature of the physical environments they've got to operate in. I think every borough now has received something in terms of this programme. One of the things that we did do is, when some bids came in which didn't meet any quality criteria that we had or weren't achieving those priorities, TfL officers have been working with those borough officers to say, well, actually, this hasn't really delivered it. Could you, maybe if you did X, Y, and Z, or this might be a way of looking at it. And I'm pleased to say that of 6 boroughs that we didn't initially make any allocations to, 5 of those 6 came back and did have significant improvements. So therefore, that will be continuing. These conversations are, the amount of work that's happening and the credit that both TfL teams and borough teams have in terms of communicating building this. This is ongoing conversations. I know that, for example, within the bidding process, some boroughs got money for things that they maybe didn't want to prioritise, and it was difficult for us to know what was prioritised and what wasn't being prioritised when people don't, when that information necessarily isn't being communicated. So there are now bilateral conversations going on to make sure that that we can iron that out. There's also now a monitoring and sort of system to make sure that what is being delivered meets the quality and is being delivered in the way that the bids propose. Yes, I hope that helps. Oh.
Sorry, the perils of still having a landline that no one ever rings. I imagine it's someone trying to scam me with something. Sorry, Julian, you were wanting to come in on that question about how the boroughs are feeling about what they're getting and how this is all working.
Yeah, so from my perspective, with my Ealing hat on, we were a borough that didn't get Mini Holland's funding. We just missed out, and that's been a kind of point of frustration for me. Wanting to go ahead and do these kind of schemes, but not having the resource to do it. So, when this came along, this seemed to be a fantastic opportunity to really push forward and get that funding that we hadn't had previously. Now, as Will said, there's been a massive oversubscription of asks from boroughs. We've pretty much got just over £1 million, but we've got schemes that would cost £3 million. So there's an awful lot more that we would want to do. I think there is a perception, and I didn't say this at the last Transport and Environment Committee, but others did, that some of the non-Mini Hollands boroughs were not getting as much as they had hoped, and that the Mini Hollands boroughs seemed to be getting a probably disproportionate whack of this round of funding. Now, there's always a chance to rectify this in the next 20 million that's going to come in the second round. So I understand that, certainly with Waltham Forest, they're the leaders. They've shown how this can be done. So there's confidence in their bids, because they've been there, they've done it, they've shown the political will to do it. And I don't think you can underestimate the importance of political leadership and political will on this. The reactions in terms of some of the low traffic neighbourhoods are quite politically challenging, and people need to show leadership and also hold their nerve in terms of going forward with this. But I certainly, talking to my other Transport and Environment Committee colleagues, they are determined to do this and to push forward with this. And as Will has said, there's a probably unlikely alliance between the Mayor and the Prime Minister on this one. Certainly I think non-Mini Hollands boroughs would appreciate a bit more in the next round.
Alison, would it be possible to quickly come back on just that and just give some reassurance on that?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yes, I think that if you'd like to come back on that, and while you're doing that, can we also, we did ask actually at the last meeting, but is it possible to get the full minutes and papers for the active travel group? Because it really would be helpful in terms of our scrutiny. As you can understand, we're a group of committed enthusiasts on this, but it would be really helpful if we're able to have those.
On that one, I think I said before that those minutes are available. I don't know if a request has come in. It certainly hasn't come to me, but I'm probably the worst person to ask. If you ask me, I'll pass it on to my team, and they'll be able to provide minutes from those meetings.
I'll do that.
On the mini Holland piece, one of the things we did want to do was make sure that while quite a lot within this first phase of stuff that was already sort of in the pipeline to get delivered, which is, I think, why some of the schemes that were already being in development were thought, well, actually, this provides good value. It does provide the need. We can do it in a slightly different way, which I think is slightly why some of those boroughs got skewed. But other boroughs have done, very well. Sadly, I think I'm in a difficult position where everyone's going to be disappointed. There's £100 million worth of applications and £30 million to really give out, and everybody now dislikes me because not everybody got what they wanted. But I think the key point here is that there is obviously the next round of DFT money that is available, this 20 million, and we're working through that at the moment. The second piece is that I'm in very regular discussions with government on what happens next. So obviously the funding package that TfL had runs up until mid-October in terms of that support package. I think we all agree that this agenda is not going to, everybody, as I've said, as Julian said, this is a shared agenda. And so actually talking through what the nature of ongoing funding models and further work on this area is something that I'm certainly talking about and having regular conversations as part of those negotiations. And I think there is this alliance saying that actually this is a really key thing as part of London and the UK's recovery.
But just in terms of having the sufficient money, because obviously the whole sort of pipeline of schemes that you had lined up through Healthy Streets has been paused. Are you confident that, because at the moment you've had this first tranche of money, and then it sort of seems like you're sort of potentially working in a sort of 6 months and then maybe a year, and then kind of whatever on earth comes in the future after that. So it's good that you've got the alliance between what government wants and what the mayor wants, and that feels very constructive. But are you confident that you are going to know how much money you've got going forward? Because once this pot of money has run out, the current Streetspace allocations, it looks a bit empty going forwards.
Well, it is empty going forward. The whole TfL, the whole TfL funding is therefore, that's why the H1, as it's known, the first half, is covering this period. Obviously, we can't make commitments to what goes on in the future beyond that. We obviously have plans. There's an awful lot of stuff, as I said, on the books. We recognise the key role that boroughs have in delivering this, but this is obviously subject to the negotiations with government. There's no other way of looking at this, really. It's, this is a priority for TfL, this is a priority for the mayor, this is a priority for the Prime Minister, it's a priority for the Secretary of State. I couldn't think of a better alignment where everybody's agreed with this. But in terms of absolute numbers, that has to be the subject of the negotiations and the final funding arrangement. But just to reassure you that the funding arrangement, we can't keep on operating on 6 months, 6 months by 6 months by 6 months. There's part of those discussions are, and as you'll be aware of some announcements recently, is looking at, well, what is the future funding arrangements for transport in London, full stop, and this has to be part of those discussions.
Yes, and just given that you are living month to month at the moment and don't have that long-term sort of continuity and certainty about funding, what about with the dangerous junctions? Are you, because that programme has obviously halted, are you able to kind of put in temporary street space routes to avoid dangerous junctions or to sort of rectify them very quickly, sort of at lower cost, a bit like some of the temporary works that you've done at Old Street? Are there ways that you can use this more temporary street space approach to tackle some of those long-term issues of very dangerous junctions? Because otherwise, if we've got a sort of pop-up bike lane along a bit of a stretch of main road, but then it all falls apart at the junction, that doesn't help to build the network that you were talking about just earlier.
Yeah, so it's been amazing how ingenious people, are engineers, both in boroughs and in TfL, have been in terms of using the temporary measures to address some of those safety concerns. But you're right, you can't do every junction, and there are routes that I've got planned. I can't do it all in temporary measures because, for example, putting in new traffic signals can't be done temporarily. That's got to be a permanent measure. So I think where, some of the discussions that I'm having at the moment are around this sort of idea of temporary plus, which is sort of continuing to use different materials, trying to do this stuff fast and providing very good value, but then looking at, well, where there is needed to be some permanent changes as part of the schemes that have been in the pipeline that have either been consulted on or will be consulted on. Can we use some of the, can we make some of those, use some permanent measures as part of that? So those are, that's not the same as the temporary schemes that's being rolled out. That's looking at some of the schemes that have been, been on the books or being designed up at the moment. So I think this is a, this is a real challenge, but in any challenge, there's a massive opportunity. And once again, just credit to the innovation and the skill sets of everybody across London who is actually delivering this in a really good way.
Thank you. And just finally, picking up on the mapping, because it's really important that Londoners can see this stuff and know how to use it. You talked about the consultation in future, having TfL and borough schemes all on a map together to be able to be consulted on. Is it possible to extend that borough and TfL routes onto the maps that that TfL has, the TfL journey planner? At the moment, for instance, the Uxbridge Road that's on Julian's screen behind him is not showing on the TfL journey planner. So is it possible to kind of get that borough and TfL road coming together on the TfL mapping systems?
It should be possible. It's taking a bit of time. When you've got 860 projects going on in boroughs, and I don't know how many projects going on, all within the matter of weeks. Literally, what's being delivered in days and weeks. What usually takes months and years being delivered in days and weeks. So I think it's fair to say we are playing catch up with some of the stuff that is going in, and IT systems tend to take a little bit longer to play catch up. This is a priority, and we're working very hard to try and get this right. Is not always perfect. Just on the consultations, we'll still have to carry out separate consultations because obviously the Highway Authority has to consult on it, in its own way. What I was talking about is the map for engagement that will be including both the TfL and the borough schemes, and I hope that will be up online soon, and I'll let you know when it is.
Thank you. And finally, if I could just echo what the chair said about the minutes of the Active Travel Oversight Group. At the moment, I'm still waiting for lots of answers on MQs about Streetspace. And a lot of what I've learned has come through from stuff that's actually been given to journalists. And we are the Assembly. We do need to be able to scrutinise what's going on. So if I could put in a plea for that information, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're all working exceptionally hard at the moment, and I really don't want stuff going out to journalists first. But everybody is working flat out at the moment, so we'll do our best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell, Assemblymember Russell, and I fully accept that there's a lot of staff are stretched and going flat out. It is helpful though to be able to have those. We are, I hope, critical friend partners in this.